Hello. So now we're going to move on to the next presentation, and presenting that's going to be Korsgaard. Did I correct? Yeah. And it's going to be about how reinventing this slumber party, right? Yes. And he's moving on from work such as button and so forth, which is all about getting the player to move around, and as you said, having the player as an output device, which is a concept that I think is really interesting. So you're going to love hearing about this. So a round of applause for Lau.
Thanks. My name is Korsgaard. I'm a game designer in a small company called Knap Nok Games, and I'm also a co-founder of something we call Copenhagen Game Collective. And today I'm gonna talk about slumber party games. So think about games like Truth or Dare, Spin the Bottle, Twister, Blindsman's Buff, Pass the Orange. Those games they're not like sex dice. It's not like sex games. They don't have sex as an end goal for the game. Yet they're also not like tag. That's tag over there. It's not like an innocent children playground game. They somehow exist in this zone between straight up sex games and innocent children games. And I think so they are kind of like more intimate, more daring than the kids game, but more innocent than the sex games. And for lack of a better word, I call those games slumber party games. Not because they exclusively have to be played at slumber parties, but because they share a common quality with slumber parties. So think about a slumber, like kids going to a slumber party. That's innocent and fun and normal. The moment you start thinking about teenagers doing a slumber party together, it starts getting a bit naughty. There are these kind of like subtext of flirtiness and sexuality. And if you think about old people going to a slumber party together, you're pretty sure that's a sex party. So what is magical about slumber party games is that they grow up with the players. As the player group matures, all these themes of sexuality, body contact, gender gets introduced. And I would argue that they don't not even grow up with the players. They also play a part in growing up the players. So at least I have a lot of memories of my first encounter with like kissing girls or sexuality. All those first encounters came from some of those games. So they and they help me like form answers to questions like who am I, or how do I perceive myself, and what is acceptable behavior towards other people, and what am I interested in? All these questions about boys, girls, gender, sexuality. And that's why I think the design of these games are really interesting, because they actually deal with some really serious topics. And I've been interested in exploring this genre through digital games. But that can also really be a minefield. A lot of stuff can go wrong. And I think one of the moments I first started thinking about this was actually watching the 2011 game We Dare by Ubisoft, and watching how they kind of like failed in so many ways. And I have a lot of respect for what Ubisoft are doing, actually. But I think in this particular case, they kind of missed the target in many ways. And I'm one of the few people who have actually played this game. So I think it's worth sharing my experience to look to kind of like look where they went wrong. First of all, when I got this game, I got it mailed to my office, and I was really excited to get to play it. So I was running around in our office and trying to get people to play. But everybody, and we're playing a lot of really weird games, and some of them, like, we're playing weird sex games, and we have even designed like experimental sex, noisy multiplayer games and so on. So we're pretty liberal in that area, but nobody wanted to play with me. Everybody was like, no, this is too much. And I can't blame them. Like, look at that box art. The game basically tells you, like, okay, you're going to lose your clothes, and you're going to get tied up, and you're probably going to have sex. So it's like overly sexually framed. And like the brilliance of slumber party games is that they are excuses to kiss each other, the excuses to flirt, excuses to touch each other. And like that game, this box art is not a really good excuse. Like walking up to people and say, hey, do you want to play a sex game? That's not a good excuse for flirting. So I think in the framing, the kind of like failed in realizing that you have to, like, basically a lot of people want to play naughty games, but they don't want to tell each other that we're playing a naughty game. So I had to start the game myself while waiting for backup. And the first thing you're doing is to create a character and dress it up and to look like cool or sexy or whatever. So I picked an avatar, and then you have to like select your gender, fair enough. Then you come to this screen where you have to select between a set of gender stereotypes. So a girl can be a tomboy, a femme fatale, a diva, a housewife. And if you're a boy, you can be like the jock, the nerd, the handyman, the pretty boy, or something like that. And I felt that was really weird. Like I was, and when you're like, when I selected nerd, for instance, I could only dress up in nerd clothes. So there's actually been programmers and artists spending time making that menu, and the only thing it does is that it limits my creativity and limits my expression, like possibilities of expression. You could imagine exactly the same game where you could mix like a tomboy trousers and a pin-up girl top, but they have actually spent time making sure that these stereotypes happen in the way they imagine it. And it's not that I'm against playing around with stereotypes. That could be fun, but at some point you start taking offense, and that's awkward. So when my friend, the other friends shows up and we started to play, the first game we encountered, the minigame we encountered was a minigame called Battle of the Sexes. There, the girls, or those who picked a female gender, they got asked girly questions about makeup or fashion or art, and the boys were asked boyish questions about cars and sport and alcohol. And it was really weird and awkward because none of us could actually like answer those questions. Like the boys failed at being boys and the girls failed at being girls. So, and that's not flirty fun when we are failing at being boys and girls in the way the game are telling us to be it. After that, more or less, the rest of the mini games were a variation of this kind of like classical dancing game where you're looking at, like you're standing shoulder to shoulder basically, and you're looking at the TV. You're not looking at each other. You're performing a predefined dance move. You're not improvising. So I don't think that doesn't really have much to do with dancing actually, and it certainly has nothing to do with flirting. So it turned awkward and turned not that interesting and not that like not that fun actually. So I think Ubisoft failed to recognize what in their source material that makes Slumber Party games so great. And we, when we tried to design our own digital Slumber Party game called Spin the Bottle, Bumpie's Party, we really sat down and thought a lot about like how do these games work. So in Spin the Bottle, it's a variation of the classical Spin the Bottle game where you kiss each other. Here you like, spin a bottle on the gamepad and you get a random partner. And then you have to do something exciting with that person that involves like body contact or eye contact or just being like awkward. Here you're passing a Wiimote under your legs and over your heads and so on. And I think the first lesson we learned, or the first thing we realized about Slumber Party games is that they involve looking at each other. Like a common design principle in Slumber Party games is that you sit in a circle, basically. And we had for years experimented with weird like party games prototypes, but we could never really see a way to release that on a mainstream console. Then the Wii U came out, and that was really interesting because suddenly you had an option to make a console game, but where you could turn off the TV and sit in a circle around the gamepad. So the new possibilities of new hardware actually sparked our interest in making this game. Secondly, I think many Slumber Party games are actually gender neutral. Like think about the original Spin the Bottle. You spin a bottle and then you just kiss that person. Would that game be better if it somehow intelligently only ensured heterosexual matchups? I wouldn't argue so. I think part of the thrill is this kind of like ambiguity of gender. You just have to kiss whoever it hits. So to us, making a gender-neutral game didn't mean that we wanted to remove gender from the expression, but just to open up for more possibilities. So you pick an avatar, also in Spin the Bottle, and we have some avatars that are clearly kind of like masculine-ish. And we have some that are clearly girls, feminine. Then we have some avatars that kind of picks from both. And we have a bunch of avatars that are neither. And I think that's a really important design lesson that you can use in a lot of games, that you can make a gender-neutral game, but not removing gender from the equation. You can like open up for more possibilities and have a big palette of gender expressions, basically. Lastly, as I touched before, like I think the first rule of naughty games is to not call it a naughty game. All the suggestiveness of Twister, for instance, is not printed on the box. It doesn't say crotch-rubbing game. It's like it's framed as a fun family game, and it can be a fun family game if the players just wanted to happen like that way. And I think we took that, like seeing how Ubisoft really missed that. We took that really seriously. So my rule of thumb was during the development to only design mini games and challenges that Uffe, our programmer, could go home and play with his kids. And that worked out pretty well. I have actually played the game with my parents, and it wasn't that awkward. It's all a question of kind of like framing. And I think we really succeeded on that. We got a review on the Christian gaming website, Family Friendly Gaming. And he writes, Paul writes, I never played Spin the Bottle when I was younger. Maybe it was not that popular at that time or in that area. Maybe it was because I'm more interested in promoting the kingdom of God over things of the world. And this is the way the review starts. And I was like, okay, let's see where this goes. And he ends up concluding, the core of Spin the Bottle, Bumpie's Party, is togetherness. The Wii U game, this Wii U game can help families spend some fun quality time together. And isn't that wonderful? Like, he's not even seeing the penis creatures. And I don't even think that we have cheated Paul into playing some kind of sinful game with his family. I actually think it's the rest of us who are cheating ourselves. I think we are so juvenile that we cannot even see a sausage without like giggling. But the moment, like, when you have an innocent mind, you only see an innocent game. But the moment, like, a naughty mind start playing this game, I don't know what happens. So to sum up, I think we drew at least 3 lessons. Like, we were critically examining like gender representation in the game, and opened up a big palette of expressions, of gender expressions. We were designing a game for looking at each other. Sorry. And I think it's worth considering what technology, what the technology and the layout of our playing spaces do for the games we can play. Like, think about a typical console gaming situation. Like, you're sitting in a couch and looking in one direction. That really limits the games you can design. And it's even worse for PC. Like, you're sitting on a desk in one chair and there's only one player there. So it's really worth thinking about the design of our spaces and the hardware and what it can do to the games we're doing. And lastly, good slumber party games can be played innocently and they can be played naughty. And the goal is to empower the players to put in their own interpretation of the games, not to force down some kind of like play style. And all that is, I think we got all these lessons from slumber party games, but it's also worth considering that not everyone have fun memories of slumber parties and all these games. I think growing up and like dealing with all these questions of gender and sexuality is hard for everybody, but it's certainly it's certainly harder for some. And I think like in all these games, there are themes of like peer pressure and public shaming and like unintentionally body contact. And that's certainly a theme, and it can be really exciting for a lot of people to play around with that. But it can be, while it can also be devastating for other people. So how do we tackle that? Like, do we, in the name of inclusiveness, set up objective rules about what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do? Like, do we print in the manual that remember that you should not grope the ass of another player? That is very bad. I think that would be a big mistake, because I think that slumber party games works as a test bed for young people to figure out that there are no kind of like objective rules about social behavior. It's always context dependent, and it requires like extreme sensitivity, and it requires practice. So what is okay and what is not okay to do is not something you can look up in a manual. It's something that is your responsibility to figure out. And I hope those lessons can be learned in the kind of relatively safe environment that a slumber party game is, rather than people failing at that later in life. With those words, I'm done. So, any questions? We have time for... Yes, there are people wanting to ask. Who is running around with microphones?
Hello, Lau. Great talk. I have a question. What lessons, or how can you take the lessons that you learned from working on slumber party games like this and apply them to things like avatar construction in third-person games?
I think my biggest takeout is actually to empower the players and not be like actually stepping a bit away as a game designer. Often game designers think that they know best about like how the game should look or how the game should be played and what is fun and what is not fun. But I really believe that a lot of player knows better, or even if they like players think this game should be played in this way or it should look like this, and you think is wrong, it's still like I think the players are actually right. So I think like give the players opportunity to express themselves in ways you wouldn't imagine is kind of my takeout of that. There.
You named one other game for the Wii there and your own game. What other games are there in this genre?
So we do have a bunch. I don't know if Adrian went out, but Adrian from Game Oven is also really exploring this genre of, especially on mobile. So there's a game called Finkel where you like rub fingers at each other, and he just made a game called Bowden that is a dancing game, but not a dancing game where you're like, or the other dancing game where you look at a TV and do this, but a dancing game where you hold the mobile together and you have like, you're moving around and in the end performing dance moves. So I think those games are really inspirational in that genre. Then there's a bunch of games, like we also did a game called Brutally Unfair Tactics, Totally Okay Now, Button, which is more exploring the more physical violence side of this, but like where you like push each other and like push buttons and more like wrestle. But I think it's touching some of the same themes about there's no objective rules about like how violent you can be towards your friends, but you're like playfully like wrestling with each other, and that's really like a friendly, empowering thing. So there's a bunch of other games in that genre of like friendly wrestling, like real life wrestling games. But else, it's unexplored space, so you should go there.
I'm quite keen to know because, with Button is a very competitive game. This game is largely a bit more cooperative in nature. Like, Does competition play a role in the design of the challenges here, or is it something that you want to sort of tone down so that people kind of feel a bit more together as a group?
So the idea here is that you're playing, for instance, 8 people together, and you're all competing actually, but on a meta level. So one player is spinning a bottle, getting a partner, and at that moment those two are cooperating, and if they do the challenge, they score a point. But next round, there might be another random matchup, so you might score a point with another player. So you're always collaborating in the challenges, but you're competing all of them. And whenever somebody reaches the threshold of 5 points, they win, and their partner that moment wins as well. Which is also kind of, it turned out to be a really nice catch-up mechanic, that even though you haven't scored any points, if you just happen to complete the challenge with the winner, you will also be a winner. Kind of a winner, at least. And that feels really good for everybody. Other questions? So, how did the playtesting go? We playtested a lot, actually. So, and mostly during Friday bars in the office. So almost every Friday we invited friends over and we played the game. And I think so this game is, I had this in mind, or these target groups in mind, that I was targeting kids and families, but also drunk young people. And I think there's a big overlap between drunk young people and kids and what they like. So we kind of figured if we like to play this when you're drunk, probably kids like to play it as well. And I think that's a really good lesson. You should, if you're designing kids games, get drunk and try to play it. I think it will work. I don't. What time is it? Are we over time?
We have time for one more.
If there is any. There aren't. Okay. Oh, there were. Yes.
Yeah, about the last thing you said. How does it work in marketing?
That's actually extremely tricky, and maybe a topic for another talk. It has been really hard figuring out how to frame this right. And I think, for instance, it hasn't been received that well in the States. Or it has been received okay, but a lot of people thought it was too naughty. They have, Spin the Bottle in America is having all these sexual subtext of you're kissing each other and so on. So I don't think parents would let their children buy this game and play it. So I actually think maybe we shouldn't have called this Spin the Bottle, but just Bumpie's Party or something like that. Because I think it's actually, I think even us went too much towards calling this a sex game or a kissing game or something like that. But still, it also has the appeal. It's a good story. It's interesting when it's about kissing and so on. So it's a trade-off. Thank you for listening.